let's hear from the public that wants to speak, and then after that, we'll close it with any final comments or anything that the committee may have. So we have 3 cards that would like to speak. Ms. Brandy Melissa, Dr. Vicky Tolliver August, and Leah Noel. So now would be the time for you to come and address the committee, and we want to thank you for your patience of being here, but now would be the time to join us. Ms. Melissa, nice to see you.
Same to you. I'm Brandy, for y'all that don't know me. Other than Representative Mizell, Senator Mizell, I'm sorry. Representative Hughes, and I know Senator McMath in the previous years have discussed why we've been sitting here for 3 hours. The problems that have been in the media this year are nothing new. A couple of years ago, when the people were in this committee, they said changes were going to happen. We have a 2-year-old dead from his 3rd fentanyl overdose, and more foster kids are being molested by their foster parents, and that's also not a first-time occurrence. In the early 90s, not too long after what you mentioned, Senator Luna, I was removed from school on a Friday afternoon for an allergic reaction to a bug bite. Foster kids are supposed to have their own rooms, their own beds. I slept in the living room. The year after, I turned my oldest brother in for molesting me in a house with grown adult men. Nobody said anything. When I filled out my card to talk, people got nervous. I love this current secretary. Even when in 2016, she got in front of a committee and said if the budget was cut, certain calls would get ignored. I wasn't too fond of that. We've been at odds a few times over different stuff because y'all are looking at a non-viable pregnancy because of the domestic violence and late-term pregnancy termination. I have a pretty much non-existent brain and skull right now, and I'm about to be 39 Monday. I just had a wisdom tooth extraction 2 weeks ago. Because of my medical condition, I had to deal with the post-op without pain medication. And I'm sorry, but I don't have the medical record I do with the experience I have. And I can't sit here and be quiet about the stuff that's going on because it literally irks me to my core. The conditions that these kids are being forced to stay in when they come out of trauma. Imagine somebody being sexually abused, going into a foster home where it continues to happen by their foster parent that was supposed to be guided by the state. You know, they got certified and everything else. They passed all of them tests. My first experience with OCS, DCFS, whatever it was back then, you know, showing my age, was being in an emergency room when all that stuff happened when my brother was molesting me. A sheriff's deputy told my mother if she did not find my brother somewhere else to go, I was going in foster care. A year later, I was for non-abuse. It fractured my entire family. My mom died with her 2 oldest children hating her guts. And I'm sorry, but it needs to stop. In these discussions that y'all been having for 3 hours, I hear during the session in appropriations and finance. This is health and welfare. We're here to talk about dead children, kids being killed from fentanyl overdoses, 2 years old. No hospital gives Narcan to a 2-year-old on a daily basis. Those calls were substantiated because that's not normal. We're talking about kids being sexually violated. To this day, I can't handle certain situations because of what I went through as a child. And that happened from my brother being violated by a Bible college student who is currently writing in Rayburn. Y'all probably saw on Channel 2 in April. It's a cycle that's going to continue till change happens from the top to the bottom. And don't just focus on the secretary of the department. Y'all need to focus on the parish where the problems happen. Because there's somebody sitting in this room that nobody's talking about that needs to be looked into, and I'm leaving it at that. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you for your testimony. I did call on a couple other folks. I'm not sure if you're still here, but now would be the time. If anybody from the general public would like to comment, now would be the time. And just state your name, and we welcome you into the committee. Stacy McPherson, I think, has a card. If you would like to speak, we can put 3 people at the table. Anybody else? We can, like I said, we can put 3 people at the table.
To the end then.
Wherever you'd like to be.
Like that person.
It's all yours, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, committee, for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Vicki Tolliver August. First and foremost, I know the secretary knows who I am. Dr. Renda Hodnett knows who I am. I am a foster parent, and I'm an educator as well. I hear a lot of talk about educators, and yes, there is a shortage in education, and we have innovative ways for filling those positions, so I do concur with what you stated. My experience with this agency has been an utter nightmare, a nightmare. I've come to the point where I'm considering closing my home. However, I've had numerous people to ask me not to close my home because I've been a staunch advocate for these kids in foster care. When I say that my complaints have been documented, Secretary Walters and Dr. Hodnett knows my complaints have been documented. And because of that, I feel as though I have a target on my back. My experience first started, and let me please go back and say, I do thank you too, because I can tell you this much. Every time I have written a letter to Secretary Walters and Dr. Hodnett, I have gotten responses. Should I have had to escalate it to the top? Not really. Having 5 to 6 managers, one would think it wouldn't have had to get that far. But that is how DCFS works. You have so many people at the top, it's top heavy, that when it gets to the bottom, nothing is getting done. And you're working these people to death when these other 5 to 6 individuals are sitting there sometimes in the confines of their homes, working from home, making these large salaries.
Can you give us, as you talking, can you give us like a real life example?
Yes, okay.
A challenge you had that we could all relate to?
Yes. Well, I don't know if you could relate
Well,
to
not
this.
relate, but
Okay.
that we could understand.
Okay.
That we could understand.
When I first came into the agency, we were required to provide documentation of everyone that's in the home. And I'm talking about confidential information, birth certificates, Social Security cards, driver's license, immunization records, things of that nature. Well, I did that for every family member. And lo and behold, all of my information vanished. We're talking about confidential information. Social Security numbers, driver's license, all of my documents vanished. I had a right to be upset because I work with children. I do the same thing as child welfare workers, but from an educational perspective. I write reports. I work with families. I evaluate, do diagnostic testing for kids. Some of my reports can be as short as 15 pages. Some of them can be 70 pages. It just depends. And I work as a part of a multidisciplinary team. And most of the time, I am the evaluation coordinator. So when I get this confidential information from these families and doctors and psychologists, it's incumbent upon me to make sure those documents stay confidential. I cannot lose that information. It has to stay under lock and key. So yes, I was very upset that all of my information, and to this day, almost 6 years later, nobody can tell me where it went at all. So when I made a complaint about that, the child welfare worker who I was assigned to, she was upset. And she said some very disparaging words about me, which I didn't know until I get further down in my story, and I can tell you. So to fast forward, this child care worker, she did the home study. As a person who's responsible for writing reports, I give copies. All school districts that do, it's called pupil appraisal. We go over the findings with parents. We discuss these findings to make sure if there's anything that's wrong, we fix it. We have a compliance department that rereads our reports to make sure that we don't have Billy listed as Barbara or the date of birth wrong, So we have someone to oversee what we also write. Well, that didn't happen in my case. I continuously asked for a copy of my home study. I was told the agency's policy was that they don't give you copies. I said, okay, well, could I read the home study? You can keep it and we just go over it because I wanted to make sure everything was accurate. They refused. I went all the way up to the top. I didn't get to Secretary Walters or Dr. Hodnett in this case because I got stopped. But that individual told me, well, it's in the state law that we can't, share the home study results with parents. And I found it to be very conflicting because I had a home study completed on behalf of Department of Children and Family Services by the Catholic Community Services for a child-specific adoption. I got a copy of that home study. Which was commissioned by the DCFS. So I'm not sure when the policy changed, don't know. But I kept pursuing getting a copy of the home study, or at least discussing it with someone. Not sure whom became privy to my complaint, but I got a copy of the home study. Someone mailed it to me from inside of DCFS anonymously. I got it. And when I got the home study, I was livid. So some people may be getting approved to be foster parents who may not, in actuality, be qualified to be foster parents because my home study was copied and pasted from somebody else's. It's like a template was used, and they simply took the information from one home study and possibly others, and put the information into my home study. The names of my children were wrong. The dates of birth were wrong. The schools attended were wrong. The ages were wrong. They had me being born in 1976 when my oldest child was born in 1986. So that didn't look too great because that meant I had a child at 10 years of age. So, of course, I was very, very upset. I put it in writing, sent a certified letter. I made a copy. I highlighted all of the errors. That got their attention. Secretary Walters assigned someone to get in touch with me, and that was Miss Karen Washington. I met with her. She apologized for the home study because it was, grammatically speaking, it was horrible. Run-on sentences, sentence fragments, paragraphs like just left out. It was like a third grader had written this report. And she apologized. So we got together and she corrected it. Well, in the process of this, that same child welfare worker ended up sending a disparaging email about me. Now, she used that same email thread that I had sent the complaint on. not realizing that I was included on the email. And she was talking about me. And this is what she said, quote, "You all better make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's when you dealing with this woman. She will hold your feet to the fire." Not realizing I was also a part of that email. And I responded to all, "You are absolutely right." And I made sure she was removed from being my child welfare worker because she had already established this bias. It's not that I was out to get anyone or to antagonize anyone, but I wanted I wanted her to do her job. You fabricated a home study, you put information in there that was incorrect, you didn't care, you got mad when I called you out on it, then you made me a target in this office. So what they started doing was they wouldn't call me for children. They wouldn't call me at all. They had set up like a bullseye on my back. So at that point, I requested, because I did eventually get some kids who they stated they couldn't find homes for, and they tried this and tried that, and I just happened to know one of the foster parents. So I did get some kids, but I requested at the same time to have my case transferred to the Baton Rouge office until I was told this worker was going to get some sensitivity training and that she was going to retire. So I wanted to go to another region just temporarily until this worker retired. So that is the request that I put in. Eventually, I was told by other foster parents, because I'm supposed to be in the Thibodeau region, I requested to go back because I do something very similar. So I work with a lot of parents in the Baton Rouge area, and it was causing a conflict of interest. So when I was told that the caseworker had retired, I put in a request in writing to be transferred back to my region. I was told by one of these regional directors that it was going to be done. He assured me it was going to be done. My case sat and sat and sat. Then I found out that I didn't even have a home development worker, and nobody had told me. So my case had just been sitting there collecting dust. We were not getting any calls, even though we had availability. I subsequently wrote another email, and that led to a Zoom meeting with this middle level manager and his colleague. They're on the same level, but they run two different regions. So he was over 3 regions, she was over 3 regions. I was told that my case was going to go back to the original place where it was supposed to be, because I have a relationship with these foster parents. I live in this region. So I was assured it was going back to the Thibodeau region. It did not. So once again, I started writing emails. I got in touch with Dr. Hodnett. She and I conversed about this. She said, okay, she was going to put our family back in the Thibodeau region. Well, that didn't manifest because that manager, who I had the Zoom meeting with in the comfort, while she was in the comfort of her home sipping tea or coffee or whatever, she intervened. And her excuse was, oh, we're shorthanded. We're going to put you in the Covington region. So I have a home development worker all the way over in the Slidell area, and I live in Ascension Parish. So I'm not getting it. I wasn't getting any calls, and I'm a part of the Thibodeau region where there's a great need for foster parents. The need is so great that they're going on Facebook saying, do you have openings? Can you please take these kids? But I can't get a call because I'm in this region so far away, and the only way I get that call is if they have to send these requests to other regions. So that's another problem, that they have these regions set up with home development. So my thing is, as some of these workers, some of the actual employees have stated, some of the issues have to do with harassment. It has to do with oversight, too much oversight, and it also have to do with biases. Because this, unfortunately, Dr. Hodnett convinced me to go to this region against my better judgment, and it has been a nightmare for me and my family. That's just one of the issues. Another issue, what I have found, caseworkers do not do their due diligence. When kids are brought into the system, it was, to my understanding, when I became a foster parent, is that the goal of taking these kids in is reunification, if at all possible. They're supposed to seek out a suitable relative. That is not being done at all. It's not being done. So kids are languishing in the system because they're not trying to find relatives. I'm working with a child right now, and that is the case. So I know this to be a fact. Some cases are fast-tracked, meaning that whoever that caseworker is and however she writes that case, they push those kids through for adoption. Sometimes foster parents sabotage that because they want to adopt. And that's the unfortunate thing, because we're certified as foster and we're certified as foster to adopt. But I would never sabotage a child's reunification goal at the expense of my wanting to have that child for myself. And that's an issue. Another issue is breaking up sibling groups when there are homes available in other regions. I just experienced this about 2 months ago. A sibling group came in, it was 4. That sibling group had a family in another region that agreed to take them. This came from the child welfare worker. She said, I found a home for them, but my supervisor would not allow me to place the kids in that home because it was outside of the region. So you know what happened? They split those kids up into 4 separate homes across 2 regions. Even though there was a home that was willing to take all 4 and head the room. So it's these hidden biases like this and these selfish ideas that they have about where children should and should not be. Another issue that I have found, when it comes to children of color, they're quick to call a family that's not a person of color or a family that's of color. But flip it around. If it's a Caucasian child or a child that is not a minority, they're very hesitant to place that child with black families. I know because I was called about 2 weeks ago. And the child that they called me about, which is in the Slidell area, is still not placed. But I think that the worker didn't want to place her with me because I'm African American. I have found it to be an issue. A lot of parents have found it to be, foster parents of color have found it to be an issue. They can say what they want to say, but we know that these are issues. And finally, families that are interested in adoption have been overlooked for a placement and are not considered due to a lack of information of their certification in a statewide database. And I'm bringing this up because families have asked me to bring this up. There's no database at all to verify whether or not a family is certified for adoption and or foster care. They you have to give your caseworker's name to another caseworker who then calls the other region to verify if you are actually certified. And in 2022, with all the technology that we have, there is no reason why there should not be a statewide database. These are my experiences with this agency, and I guarantee you, since I have been very vocal about it, and I'm going on record again stating that I would like to be back in my region where I live so that I can get kids from my region. But these are issues, and unfortunately, Secretary Walters is sweet as she can be. Dr. Renda Hodnett, phenomenal. I even have her personal cell phone number. But it is those people below them, those middle level managers, those regional managers who happen to be over 3 different parish offices or however they want to go. That's where your biggest problem is. That's where your problem is, along with these supervisors that are managers of these parish offices. That's your biggest problem.
Thank you. Your testimony is so insightful. And just so you and the public know, we take in all of that into the minutes. We're going to work on a lot of these issues. There's different agencies that look at different things, like the Legislative Auditor's Office is going to probably take in your testimony. So we want you to know that there's checks and balances. I know you've heard the department's thought process, their vision, but we thank you so much for being out there to take care of our children. And anytime you want to send this committee any information, we're happy to receive it.
Thank you for your time.
And thank you for education for the kids. We do have a question from Senator Fessy.
It's not really a question. I just want to thank you for coming forward, because exactly what you're saying is what I'm hearing, and I'm hearing from a lot of people. And like you said, it's not the secretary or assistant. It's in between, and that's what I was saying about the layers of management. We need to fix it. So I agree with you 100%, because everything you said, I've heard 3 or 4 times, and it's something that we have to get a handle on. And it's devastating these children. But when you told me you separated 4 siblings, that's the worst thing you could do.
Yes, I agree.
So we need to fix it and fix it quick. So thank you so much for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Senator Carter.
Thank you. I just want to also echo the comments from Senator Fessy and thank you for providing your testimony today and your experiences and sharing that with this committee. I certainly have heard, Madam Secretary, as well, allegations about racism, allegations about people not being treated fairly. Is that being investigated as well? I know we're doing a lot in terms of numbers and budgets and making sure that we're recruiting and making sure that people are properly trained. Are we also implementing diversity training and make certain that allegations of racism are, one, addressed, and then they're stamped out wherever we find them? I see you nodding, but as we continue this, I just want to make sure that remains part of our focus, is addressing all concerns. Thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
I think that there's an ongoing list, so we can either have the
Add that to the
secretary-
list, please.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Thank you, Senator Carter. If you want to.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Stacy McPherson. I was not prepared to talk today, so I brought nothing. But as a previous DCFS worker myself, not in this Baton Rouge region, it's a different region, in Alexandria, I recently left the end of July, and I'm going to cry and try not to cry, because that was probably the hardest decision I ever made in regards to my career. I've watched these interviews, I've watched these legislative sessions, and about how workers need to care about these kids, and these children need to be put first. And I know for 6 years that these children and these families were my life. And when I say my life, it took precedence over my own children. It took precedence over my mother, who was sick and is now deceased, and I can't get any of that time back with my kids or my mother, because I devoted myself to this job 24/7. And Renda Hodnett and Marquita Walters know this. I've emailed them. I have stated on numerous occasions the concerns in the region that I was in, the toxicity in these work environments that gave not just myself but coworkers extreme anxiety, the symptoms of almost PTSD of having to return to these offices the next day or on a Monday. I know the retaliation that I'm going to face from sitting here right now. I know that it's coming. I know what they're thinking as I'm sitting here putting all of this out here, but these are children. These are children that cannot speak for themselves. They can't fight for themselves. It's like the only advocate they have are these workers, the workers that care. I'm not even going to say it's all of them. There's a handful of workers that truly put their heart and soul into what they do in this job every day, every night. I've worked 19 hours a day, numerous days a week, and I don't get time and a half for that. I get off at 4 and I get K time. I had tons of K time when I left because I didn't take off, because I knew the work that was there that had to be done. I knew the work that was going to be there if I left and came back in 3 or 4 days. My children needed me. My foster parents needed me. My families needed me. I really feel like in my heart that I did everything for them that I could do. I have continued, as I sit here today, I am not working. I have not worked since I left DCFS, and I will tell you I made over $43,000 a year after 6 years of being there. The money is not the issue. The 5 people that left this one office as foster care workers within the last 5 weeks, 5 workers left. 20 years, 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, they've been there. None of it was money. Not one reason for any individual that left. It is the toxicity of the work environment. That's what it is.
Talk a little bit more about the toxicity.
We knew that it was kind of a, I guess, underlying, non-official, you do what you're told to do. You don't go against the system. You don't state your concerns, because if you do that, you get the retaliation of just the, just being, everything's going to be your fault. They want you to go with the flow. They want to say, this is what you do, and this is what and this is how you do it, and you just do it.
Who's they?
Supervisors, management, directors. It's even been as far up. I mean, I've went to the top. I've went to the top over and over and over, and there's been nothing. I went in 2020 with a host of people and met with Ms. Hodnett and Ms. Walters, numerous just dire concerns that were put in front of them by numerous individuals. That was 2.5 years ago. You know, so for me to sit here as a previous worker and hear that, you know, we've taken care of concerns, they haven't been taken care of. We're in a worse place now when I left in July than we were in 2020. There were concerns that were brought to their attention in 2018, and when I say there, it's supervisors up, in 2018. So here we are at the end of 2022, and we're in a worse position than we were in 2018, than we were in 2020. There's nothing that's getting better. It's not even, so to speak, the case loads. During my 6 years there, I carried almost 30 cases in a foster care caseload while I was helping out with investigations due to backlogs. So I probably had over 30 cases between 2 programs. I wasn't stressed out. I had a good supervisor. I had a good manager at that time. It was during the 6 years of my lowest caseload that I got put on medication, that I was in and out of a doctor, because I felt like I had the target on my back, so to speak, because I spoke up and I stated my concerns and I fought for my kids. And fighting for my kids, I've had cases taken away from me that I had for probably 2 years because I was too attached, and that was the exact words that I was told by a manager, that I'm too attached. 3 very, very small children that I was the only consistency in 2 years that those children had were given to a whole nother parish and region, because I was too attached to these children.
So in the 5 workers that basically had a high-level meeting, what were the main talking points that were brought out that would help the committee to understand the plight of some of the workers in a toxic work environment?
It was discussed that there were workers that we weren't allowed to go in other workers' offices or communicate with other workers. The division is extremely rough, where workers were hiding under co-workers' desk because a supervisor or manager would come in, so they would have to hide because there would be retaliation for that. You would get in trouble for that, for communicating at all. There was a fatality that was addressed during that meeting in great detail of how that child passed away, an infant. about it, there were foster parents who talked about kind of the same things that she's discussed, that, we have to provide all of this stuff to DCFS to be able to take care of a child. They're willing and they're able and they want to love on these kids, and foster parents leave when their good worker walks out the door. Sometimes they won't take cases unless they know who the caseworker is, because they know who the good workers are and who's not. I've had foster parents who have closed their homes because they're kind of dealing with the same things that she has of, they speak up for the children and they try to advocate and fight for them, and they're retaliated against. So kids don't get put in their home and they don't get phone calls. And it seems like the more all of these meetings come out, the more it's across the whole state of Louisiana. I can only speak for the 2 parishes that I worked in, but it was the same exact circumstances, the same exact environment, that led me to put in a 2-week notice and walk out the door. And I was told in the midst of my 2 weeks that I was to have no contact with my children, no contact with my foster parents, and no contact with my biological parents at all. At that time, I was still an employee at DCFS. My teenagers that I've been their only stability for 2 years were told they're not allowed to talk to me. They can't call me. I can't talk to them. No communication has been done with me or any of my foster children that I had while I was there. All of these children I had for a year and a half or more. And that, if we're going to talk about what's in the best interest of our foster children, then let's talk about what's in their best interest. We're pulling their stability. We're pulling the ones that love them and care about them when their parents are not in the capacity to be able to do that. But we can't go in an office and talk about the fun things we did with our foster child or how much we care about this child, because we risk that whole case being pulled away from us. So we just kind of sit in our office and we do our work, and we just hope to make it through that one day, because every day is excruciating. It's toxic. It's extremely toxic, and I don't know any other words to say for that.
Well, we appreciate you coming here, and Dr. Tolliver kind of left us with some to-dos to look at, and you left us also we have some questions from the committee members. But as you conclude, kind of my questioning with you is, any advice you would tell us to dig a little deeper, do a little bit more research, do some things, because any action plans you would give us from your years of experience and your colleagues who left?
I think that any worker in any given DCFS office needs to be talked to individually. There's a lot of workers, and I kind of feel like, because I'm not there, that I have to speak for my coworkers that I left behind that are struggling, that they're trying to do their job. They're trying to just hold on with that last little string before they walk out the door, because it's coming. There's other workers that are just a hair away from going out the door. And it's not because of money. It's because of supervisors and management and directors, and they feel like they're not being listened to. They feel like they're not important, that it's documentation, and it's doing everything but what's in the best interest of a child. So they're scared to talk, but that would be my suggestion, is that somebody outside of from the top to the bottom needs to go, because they're very untrusting. It's hard to sit here. I've been where they are. I've been in that position where I wanted so bad to just scream that this is what's going on, but you can't do it because you're risking your career in doing that.
We appreciate it, and it was a pleasure for us to visit you. Senator McMahon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. McPherson, excuse me. I really appreciate your testimony today. It's helpful to hear from. I think you might be the first recent recently employed, caseworker that has come and given input, and I've found it to be very valuable. I have a dear friend of mine who is a constituent who was in your position for many, many years, and she has given me stories, and it's very consistent with your experience, and that is it's not necessarily about the money or the workload. It was the support or lack of support that she was not getting from management. She walks dogs now, and while she finds it to be much less stressful than the job that she held at DCFS, it's not nearly as rewarding. And she said if it ever changes, she would seriously consider going back, but she still keeps in touch. And so I've gotten some input from her, and it's, again, very similar to what you're saying. And Doctor, I appreciate your testimony as well. There seems to be a theme of retaliation that we have heard consistently when we're discussing foster care, or the experiences that you've had. That's something that's very I don't know, it irks me, and I hope that's not the case. Where there's smoke, there's fire, and we've just heard it from so many different individuals that I find it unfortunate, but yet probably accurate. Is it your opinion that the two children that were transferred because of your alleged or supposed attachment to them, do you believe that was based off of, that was some sort of retaliatory action? Or
I do.
Can you speak to that case a little bit? I was trying to follow you, but
I do. They've been adopted, but I don't want to give specifics.
And don't, please,
But
obviously, don't reveal anything you can't. But
they were very young, six, 7, and under. 3 of them,
mm-hmm.
and parents incarcerated, so they have no contact with them, no other family members, so they were in a foster home, but due to the severity of how, with 2 of those children, some of the reasons that they were in foster care, I had to spend a lot of time with them, with doctor's appointments and different things, and so you just kind of get a bond with these kids, especially when you know that they don't have anybody else. They don't have family visits. They don't have visits with the parents or grandparents or anything like that. So it was the foster parent and it was me. And I was their go-to for, when they had a bad day, when they, made the baseball team or the softball team or, anything. I was just kind of second mom is the way they said it. So when all of that's just pulled from them and you're not able to say, this is why I can't talk to you anymore at an age like that, that's another trauma for these children. That's another sense of abandonment on these children. And our policy says that, we are to encourage and support any positive attachments that these children have whenever they're in foster care. I don't know why a caseworker is exempt from that. Because some of these kids are in care for 3+ years, and that is a positive person for them, to reach out to. Even if they don't go back home to their biological parents, that's still a connection that they had during this foster care journey for them, and they're just taken from them. Mm-hmm. And I did have another case, an actual human trafficking case, where I was kind of threatened on that one being taken from me because of my attachment with this child that was like 12. For more than 2 years, I had that case before I left. And that child was devastated that I couldn't call her anymore and that she couldn't call me. There is no other attachments for her. And
that's the no contact order that came after your 2 weeks. Was that part of,
during the 2 weeks, that one?
Could you think of any logical reason as to why you were told to, after you've given your 2 weeks, to not have any contact?
I don't know.
Outside of
there were 2 other workers that left the 2 weeks prior to me. And we've talked, and they never were told not to contact their people. The kids, the parents, the biological parents, I had numerous biological parents texting me, and I couldn't, on my personal phone, and I couldn't even respond because I feared if I even reach out and say, I can't talk to you, you know, this is what I've been told, that I was going to be the one in trouble for doing that. So I had to just leave it, you know, and not respond. But out of the 3 workers that left around the time that I did, I was the only one that was instructed to not do that.
Well, listen, Ms. McPherson and Dr. Thank both of you. I think for the folks that are watching at home, and whether the current or former DCF employees or foster parents, you're giving those folks some courage to possibly speak up. And this is in no way, again, in an attempt to remove, replace, discredit agency heads or the department as a whole. These discussions, I think, are helpful in terms of making DCFS better for the kids that they serve. So thank you for giving those folks the courage to testify. Thank you.
Very well said. One quick question, and then we'll turn over to the next panelist. The 5 people that had the exit meeting, and if you're comfortable saying this, or if you're not comfortable with this answer, how were the 5 of you guys collectively on a year-to-year basis when you were evaluated by your supervisor? Was it to the standpoint where you received your annual merit raise? Did you get satisfactory evaluations as a group? Was this a group that had problems? Tell us about, if we looked at the personnel files of these people, what would we see?
I know that all of my evaluations that I've looked at since I left, they were all satisfactory. And there's, you know, I have numerous emails that I printed and kept before I left of, you know, the I guess extent of documentation and how clear it was and how much was in there. You know, I don't feel like I was one of those workers that just got by. I didn't just show up to say that I had a job. That was where my heart was before I even got there.
Yeah.
The workers that left around the time that I did were the same way. There was never concerns. There was never write-ups. There was never issues. They were very hard workers that left. And I think most recent, this past Friday, there was another worker that left, just walked out. And to my knowledge, even working with her, there was never complaints about her. And that's the ones that are leaving.
Understood. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am. Please just state your name, and we welcome your testimony.
Yes, sir. My name is Leah Newell, and I'd like you to have a parent's point of view of DCFS, because I hear a lot of things that are great to make DCFS better, but I very rarely hear about DCFS caseworkers actually working with parents to make things better. Over the last 3 years, the Department of Children and Family Services has ripped apart my family. On May 6, 2019, I was in a terrible car accident after a Natchitoches City work truck pulled out in front of me. By the grace of God only, my 2 younger children, who were 2 and 1, were completely unharmed. However, I suffered from a fractured sternum, torn ligaments and muscle in my right knee, a 3rd-degree burn across my waist from my lap belt. I also had an internal injury that caused early labor at 7 months and resulted in an emergency C-section. This car accident is what prompted my first DCFS investigation, although my children were not taken away until more than a month later. Several months after this, I kept discovering new things about this initial investigation, which actually gave me answers to my case. My mother-in-law and my sister-in-law had told a hospital social worker in the ER that I had caused the accident because I had a drug addiction. This hospital social worker was a client of my mother-in-law's. When this social worker spoke to me, however, she lied and told me she was a nurse. Although I did give her a urinalysis, I was told it was to check on my unborn child's health. She made claims, however, that she drug tested this urinalysis and that I failed for amphetamines. It took 3 years before I uncovered the truth. She never gave me a drug test. Regardless, DCFS assigned an investigator to our family who harassed us relentlessly and lied multiple times so she could keep control over the investigation. This investigator originally told me after my release that the state had automatically taken custody away of my children because I was a danger to them. She used manipulation tactics to force us to take several drug tests, which all came back negative. Law enforcement was used to intimidate and threaten us. The fear of never seeing our children again was used to force us to comply. And the moment we pushed back and tried to stand up for ourselves, DCFS obtained a court order over the phone. Despite the accusations of drug usage, the reason for removal was lack of adequate supervision for only the 2 older children. But DCFS removed all 3 of my children. My husband and I backed down. We complied with DCFS, and in December 2019, a judge signed a vacate order allowing our children to come back home. However, in June 2020, that same judge removed our children a second time despite having favorable reports to close our case from a foster care caseworker, her supervisor, and our CASA advocate that was sent to the judge 4 days prior. The judge then moved our DCFS case to Sabine Parish, but kept the court proceedings in Natchitoches Parish. The Sabine Parish DCFS assigned us a case plan which was nearly impossible to complete. Among many expectations, the most difficult was that we were expected to attend 3 different classes multiple times a week that were spread out in Shreveport, Manny, and Natchitoches, all while keeping steady employment. Our Sabine Parish caseworker attempted to deny the original liberal visitation plan the judge had granted us and gave instructions to the foster parents to deny my husband and me visits and phone calls. When we were finally granted the court-ordered visits, she would change dates without informing us. The reports that she presented to the court contained hearsay and several outright lies. She refused to keep communication between us, and even with proof that she ignored phone calls and emails, her supervisor told us there was nothing we could do about it. She was absolutely malicious in denying us our constitutional right to preserve our family integrity. During a permanency hearing on May 19, 2021, this Sabine Parish DCFS caseworker admitted on the witness stand there was no justifiable cause to initiate an investigation, and there was no evidence to substantiate the removal order from June 2020. But despite this testimony from this caseworker, on July 30th, 2021, without a trial being held, the Natchitoches
Take your time. Take your time.
The Natchitoches Parish 10th Judicial Court granted guardianship to the children's paternal grandparents who served as the foster parents throughout our entire case. This judge declared in the visitation order, which was granted in October of 2021, this case is now and will always be a parental visitation only case until the subject children reach majority. Despite the fact that my husband and I were never accused or even charged with any crimes of abuse or neglect, despite 3 years of court-ordered drug testing, which all came back negative, which included hair, saliva, and urine, to the point that I had bald spots for years. Despite multiple courses of parenting, anger management, and substance abuse education, despite multiple invasive mental health and psychological evaluations, despite paying court-ordered child support while still sending groceries and anything else our children wanted every month, despite evidence and witness testimony that we were good and loving parents, despite doing everything that Natchitoches and Sabine Parish DCFS and the 10th Judicial Court asked us to do, it never seemed to matter. My husband and I were never given a chance to tell our side of the story, but I don't think anyone would have listened anyway. Because when people hear about one failed drug test, they never want to hear anything else. You're just guilty. The preamble of the Louisiana Children's Code states, the people of Louisiana recognize the family as the most fundamental unit of human society, and that preserving family is essential to a free society. But yet, Louisiana DCFS's behavior and actions did not reflect this in my case. Parents deserve the right to family integrity. Removal of a child should always be a last option because children deserve their parents, and parents deserve their children. If we want to reform DCFS, parental rights needs to be at the forefront. DCFS should focus on not just children, but the entire family unit. Because as I heard today, it really does take a village. It's my favorite saying. It takes a village. Safeguarding the family unit can only strengthen Louisiana and provide a better tomorrow, and we can only be stronger together if we actually work together.
Thank you very much for your courage to come and testify and coming all the way from Natchitoches. We appreciate that. There's one other late card I just received from Susan East Nelson with the Louisiana Partnership for Children and Families. She'd like to testify. Now would be that time. Thank you all again for coming from far. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Susan East Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana Partnership for Children and Families. We've heard some very heartbreaking things today, and I'm not at all going to deny that this is a very difficult situation. But I will say that our organization met with Secretary Walters about 2 weeks ago with a list of suggestions that we had for her, and she's already implemented several of those suggestions. We were the ones that connected her with the EAP program. We've offered our support to this organization as well. It really does take a village, and I want to tell everyone here that the village has gathered around this agency, and the agency has been receptive to a lot of their changes. I will say one of the things that has routinely come up, certainly from the family and from the DCFS worker here, that we've talked about with our friends in the social work community is implementing reflective supervision. Now, I know that would take some additional resources for the agency to do that, but I think if they did that, they could really address a lot of these issues, dealing with the staff and dealing with some of the issues with the parents and the families. But I will say, I just wanted to go on the record and say that we've offered support to the secretary. She has received that support, and I just wanted to make sure that was known.
Very good. Could you tell us maybe one or two of the key suggestions that you think will move the needle a little bit?
I think one that we certainly recommended the adoption of the EAP program through one of our member organizations, Family and Youth Counseling in Lake Charles. He has offered that support, and that they're working on that contract. We had talked about how to work through the civil service issues, maybe combining some of these positions so that you could offer additional monies, and that's been part of the conversation with the agency, with the Division of Administration. So those are two of the ones that we did very quickly. We talked about using CASA volunteers for some of the supervised visits. We had Kathleen Ritchie from the State CASA Association with us in that meeting, and she was like, how can we step in and help? And again, all of those suggestions have been received by the agency.
Very, very good. The board is clear. We've heard all of the public testimony. We've heard from the department. If the first panel wants to come up for any closing comments, now would be the time, but the board is clear. So maybe any kind of closing comments, and just as you approach the table for the public that's listening, and for anybody that is covering this issue, we're going to continue to work closely with the department. We'll continue as a committee and as legislators to look on how we can all work together. From today's meeting, we got a lot out of the standpoint. We understood a little bit more about civil service. We understood about best states practices. We understand a lot of what's going on as far as attrition rates and what's going on there. So we'll take this and we'll continue to meet. So I want the public to know that this wasn't just a one time and we leave. We'll continue to work together. And I have to say the department contacts the committee members many times. Here's what we're working on. Here's some issues. So this is not our first time to all communicate, but at this level, we'll continue it. So, Madam Secretary, if you and your staff want any parting comments, now would be the time.
Thank you. I would like to thank the four women that came to the table and made statements. I know that took a lot of courage, and I appreciate them coming. It's hard to hear what they said, and you can know that we'll be checking all that out when we get back to the office, and just really appreciate that. I appreciate you as a committee. This is hard. There's no two ways about it. It's hard when we start preparing and trying to figure out how to condense and say things tightly and cleanly so that you can understand this massive system That is child welfare. I appreciate your diligence. I appreciate all the reading that you did and all the material that you have and the studying that you have done to try to understand us better. And we just look forward to working more closely with you as the Oversight Committee. We appreciate your role in our work, and we will be faithful to answer every question that you send to us.
Thank you. Representative Hughes, I think you wanted the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very quick. First of all, again, I just want to sincerely thank you for allowing me to be a part of this oversight hearing today, and really want to thank the members of the Senate for their very thoughtful questions. Madam Secretary, I do just want to put on the record, despite my feelings about a change in direction, I just want you to know sincerely, so long as you're in your position and I'm in mine, I'm here to be a partner, and I'm here to work with you. Deputy Secretary Ricks, but as we go through that journey, Deputy Secretary Ricks stated, quote, we heard the morale was low in 2016, and here we are 6 years later, and it's still pretty low, and so we really have to dig a little deeper. We can talk about caseloads, but the many emails, the many phone calls that I get, I know you guys continue to hear it as well. The morale is not just about caseload. And I'm not going to let off on that, because we're talking about human capital. These are people that are not being treated well. I often talk about the culture of fear and retaliation. That's something that still exists. And we have to dig deeper and ask ourselves why. Madam Secretary, I know you take the work home with you at night. I know it weighs on you. But these rank and file employees, they take it home with them too. And we have some people in positions of authority that have been rude and mean and cruel, and it hurts. And, I don't know what we can do about that legislatively. That has to trickle down from the top. That culture has got to change. Because there are people who love this work, as hard as it is. They love it. They love children. They love families. And so, as I said in the Appropriations Committee many months ago, let's not make it even harder, with the politics and the culture of fear and the culture of retaliation. So I appreciate that there will be additional hearings, and just know we're all here to help. And, I'm hopeful that brighter days are ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just in conclusion, Senator Fessy, thanks for joining us. I know you've put in a lot of work in there. The committee members to take time. And I did want to note that Senator Pope did have a pressing engagement at 1 o'clock, I think, in Hammond, the Hammond area. So he did apologize, but he's going to look at it. And I do want to thank our Senate staff. You did a lot of work, and you've done a lot of research. And I can tell everyone in the audience and everybody listening that many times when there's an oversight hearing, it opens up more dialogue. So I think committee members are going to probably get emails and calls from either foster parents or adoptive parents, or they'll get calls from workers. We'll keep the lines of communication open. I think a lot of that's going to take place. I think it's going to be a lot of coverage of this. And a lot of times when the light is shined, it brings out more dialogue. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Ms. Peck, Ms. Cannon, Madam Secretary, thank you all for the work you all did. And we'll, unless there's a objection, motion by Senator Luno to adjourn, meeting has been adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.